Okay, everyone, the day has come. Assassin's Creed Shadows has launched, and it's sparked a question in my mind and in the minds of many other players as well, and that is whether or not Assassin's Creed Shadows is enough for Ubisoft to be saved from their own mismanagement over the last handful of years. I think it's a really good question. It's an important question, and it's one that applies and, of course, has major impact on the 18,000+ employees that Ubisoft has as a publisher and developer across all of their studios, and also for the fans of these series. Because I think when people throw out like the term corporate takeover from Tencent or restructuring, there's a lot of confusion as to what that realistically means or actually would mean. So I want to break it down and explain kind of what it would realistically be like, because I have a degree in corporate finance. I actually have a good amount of education in this field and topic. So I feel I'm somewhat expertly qualified for this conversation, more so than most people who would talk about it. See how I break these icicles? Isn't that cool? Isn't that cool? There you go. That's all. Sorry, guys. That's all I wanted to do. I'm just going to run over here. That being said, make sure to like the video and subscribe if you want more like business type breakdowns of the gaming industry, because like I said, I have a degree in this. I love talking about the business side of the industry, and I feel like not many people in this field are like qualified to talk about it, I guess. And so I love doing it, but I also don't want to just overload you with nerdiness. So let me know if you're interested, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. That'll let me know. That being said, I do think that there's a couple of key points that we can touch on specifically with the game, and that is that AC Shadows, as you can probably tell, represents a massive investment for Ubisoft. I mean, by all metrics, if you count marketing, if you count the long development cycle, the delay, or I guess delays of this game out of its initial release window, this game probably represents somewhere between $350 and $450 million for Ubisoft. It's a massive, massive project. It's no GTA 6, which by most metrics and analysts' estimations will cost about $2 billion when all is said and done, but still, it is a massive, massive investment for Ubisoft, and it's one they are counting on because they've had a number of pretty high-profile flops recently, which are hard to just ignore. Notably, most of these flops were in franchises and IP that were previously considered slam dunks. Almost like if you put something out in that IP, it could not fail no matter how hard you tried. Specifically, Star Wars Outlaws, Star Wars being one of the biggest IP in the world, and of course, Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora. Now, I would say that Avatar is like big when it comes to movies, but when it comes to spin-off projects or like merchandising and stuff, I don't think it's that big. I don't think it's a Star Wars, but either way, that represented a massive investment for Ubisoft. It really didn't do particularly well. Star Wars Outlaws really didn't do particularly well. And even games that Ubisoft has put out recently that were critically acclaimed, like Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, which was by most accounts one of the best platformers in recent years, even that game failed to really reach a wider market and turn a profit by most analyst estimations, which is really too bad. It's really sad that a game that was so good, because it was very good, it just didn't connect with people. It didn't sell. And so Ubisoft has pretty much been left to rely on AC Shadows to make up the slack and to try and recoup some of the crazy amounts of money that they've been dumping into these projects. And of course, now that reviews are out, we know that it's sitting at an 82 on Metacritic, and the consensus seems to be that it's a good game and it has some weird quirks to it, but on the whole, it's good. That's pretty much where the 8 out of 10 score lands. It's like a B minus, basically. It's a good score. I mean, it's nothing to balk at or anything like that. It's a solid score. I mean, it's 6 points out of 100 away from the Metacritic score of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, which I think is a downright masterpiece. If anything, I'm more baffled that that game only has an 88 on Metacritic, but it also, I guess, shows you that Metacritic, it's not the end all be all when it comes to determining quality. But anyway, the point is, it got good enough scores, not masterpiece scores, not anything crazy, but good certainly for a company like Ubisoft. I think they're very, very pleased with the 82 out of 100. But as with all things, it matters how it sells far more than what the critical reception is like. Just like with Prince of Persia, That game reviewed well, but it didn't sell well, and Ubisoft needs Shadows to sell well. But the question is, how well is well enough? Well, you see, this is where we get to the first tidbit where I'm just going to be the bearer of likely bad news for a good number of people, and that is simply to say that Assassin's Creed Shadows, it's a big game. It's going to sell millions of copies because Assassin's Creed is a huge franchise, absolutely. But I think what Ubisoft needs right now is a Valhalla level success. They need a $1 billion game. And I'm just not sure if Shadows, even though I think it's pretty good and I actually think it's better than Valhalla, though that's maybe not saying much because I really don't like Valhalla, but I just don't know if this is going to be able to break that barrier that Valhalla established, because it launched in the middle of like COVID. It launched at the height of people just looking for something to escape to, and it was a good escapist game. You know, there was a lot to play. There was a lot of junk food in that game for people to enjoy. So it was kind of the perfect game at the perfect time for Ubisoft. And they made over $1 billion on that one game. And I just don't know if there's any world in which Shadows, launching in a very competitive year, potentially the most competitive year in the last decade of gaming when it comes to quality releases, I don't know if it's going to be able to stand anywhere close to that level. Because for everybody that's like kind of on the fence, they're going to look and be like, oh, I could also get Monster Hunter. I could also save up money and get a Switch 2, which is going to have Mario Kart and probably a 3D Mario. Like, it's also going to suffer, I think, from Ubisoft-itis, which is, that sounds sexual. That Ubisoft-itis sounds really sexual. Oh, didn't mean that. What I was referring to is when people see Ubisoft games, they know it's probably a matter of like 3 months before it goes 50% off. Like, everybody knows this. I was talking to like a pretty senior marketing person from Ubisoft, and even he was telling me, yeah, we all know that our games are going to go 50% off within like a few months. Why would people buy it day one if they could just wait? Even if they're really interested in like AC Shadows, you know, you can just wait a few months and get it for 30% off, 40% off, 50% off. Everybody knows this. And as a result, you would think that Ubisoft would stop cutting their games prices, but they do it anyways, I guess, to just move copies, which as a consumer that likes sales, I appreciate that. But also, if Ubisoft is going to complain that people aren't buying the game day one at full price, I mean, you kind of did it to yourself. So all of this to say, I don't see a world in which Ubisoft sells enough copies of Assassin's Creed Shadows to completely alleviate the concerns and the pressures currently going on within their company. You see, the fact of the matter is, when you look at the whole lineup of Ubisoft titles, they have a lot of very, very valuable IP. You see, right now, Ubisoft trades for anywhere from 1.5 to like 1.7 billion US dollars in terms of value. A number of industry analysts have estimated that just the Assassin's Creed IP and Rainbow Six, just those two IP alone, should be worth about $7 billion. Just the IP. So you have to pause and think, okay, if the IP that they own together, just the two biggest ones, are worth $7 billion, why is the company that owns those IP worth a fraction of that? And it really just comes down to one word, and that is mismanagement. You see, no matter how well AC Shadows sells, the management will be the same. And so even if Shadows did $1 billion, $2 billion, it just exploded, the entire country of Japan, everybody buys a copy, which would be quite remarkable. Even then, I don't think it really changes Ubisoft's destiny with this stuff, because investors that are putting all this pressure on Ubisoft are not frustrated with individual games. They're upset with the trends, and the trend has been going down, and that is something that lands at the feet of the management. And just because you have one success, that doesn't mean that all of your other mistakes are magically forgiven. A fantastic example of this is what just happened with Warner Brothers games. David Haddad was in charge of Warner Brothers games going all the way back to basically right before Batman Arkham Knight. He headed up their gaming division after that and pretty much systematically destroyed their entire lineup of fantastic studios, very valuable IP, and he squandered amazing talent while he was at it, losing access to those very talented people and their skills when it came to producing games that people wanted and would buy. His mismanagement led to the collapse of course, Monolith, the collapse of Rocksteady Studios, and he also oversaw the release of a number of catastrophic flops, whether you look at something like Gotham Knights, Harry Potter Quidditch Champions, or of course the most obvious and visible one, Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Not to mention the other games that they were working on that never saw the light of day, like the Wonder Woman game, which lost over $100 million. When all was said and done, they basically wasted billions and billions on all of these things that he was responsible for. But they had Hogwarts Legacy, the biggest game of 2023, sold over 23 million copies in a year. Crazy levels of success, made so much money, it was ridiculous. But what happened? He still lost his job. He still got booted out just a matter of weeks ago. They're still restructuring everything because one success did not magically erase years of mismanagement. And the problem for Ubisoft is that even if Shadows is a smash hit and sells gangbusters, it doesn't change what's been going on for years, which is mismanagement, not just in wasted potential and projects that honestly should have been more successful than they were if they were marketed properly or if they were scoped and the devs were given enough time to polish, blah, blah, blah. But also other things like Ubisoft's weird obsession with trend chasing when it came to NFTs. You guys may not know this because you don't follow my second channel, which you absolutely should, Luke Stevens Live. But on my streams, we actually booted up and played one of Ubisoft's recent NFT games. Yeah, you remember NFTs from a handful of years ago, that thing that nobody talks about anymore because it's like widely regarded as a scam or a fraud, whatever thing, or at least a thing used by scammers a lot. Anyway, I wouldn't blame you if you wiped it from your memory, but Ubisoft didn't. And in the last 6 months alone, they've released 2 NFT games. 2. I'm like, what? Like, we're canceling all these other games that don't ever get out the door or see the light of day, but we're going to launch the NFT game? What are we doing? But like, that is the kind of mismanagement that I think is exemplary of Ubisoft, which is that they like spend millions upon millions of dollars on these projects that anybody could have looked at and said, that's a bad idea. You shouldn't do this. But they still waste millions and millions and millions on them for no reason at all. And it's just such a colossal waste of time and money and resources that honestly, I'm not surprised at all that investors don't have a lot of confidence in their abilities. I wouldn't if I were like asked for $100 and they're like, hey, yeah, we promise we're going to put the $100 to good use. I don't think I would believe them. Like, who would? They don't have the best or most reliable track record. I'm just saying. But okay, I think at this point you can see what I'm trying to say. I don't think there is a magic number of units that Shadows sells that magically fixes all of their problems. And even if it did sell that magical number and that number did exist, I still don't think it changes anything for Ubisoft. I think that the problems that they are faced with remain and investor confidence will still be low. Maybe for a little while they'll regain some confidence and they'll get some investors going, oh, well, maybe we give them a chance. Maybe we don't give up on them just yet. But still, fundamentally, I think that investors have kind of had enough with the current management lineup. And this has been my stance for a number of months as I've thought about this in the lead up to this game. And that is simply that I think it's somewhat inevitable that something has to happen. But now we get to the part of the video where we have to talk about what is that thing I think is inevitable? What is that thing that happens to Ubisoft's corporate structure that gets them out of the hole that they're in? This, I mean, frankly, is going to be much less bombastic than maybe you're hoping for or you're expecting. I know some like rage baiting types might be like, oh, Ubisoft is going to go insolvent or bankrupt. But that's just something because they don't know what the words insolvent or bankrupt mean. And that's okay. Not everybody has like education in finance, but I do just want to be clear that those words have specific meanings and there are certain conditions that have to be met for a company to enter into one of those states. And Ubisoft is not really that much in danger of hitting either of them because they have a like big daddy Warbucks that's sitting right next to them, willing to get them out of all of this trouble they have found themselves in. And that's Tencent. If you don't know Tencent, they're like the world's biggest gaming company. They're the big Chinese behemoth gaming company that owns a little sliver of pretty much every gaming company you can imagine. And they own a sizable chunk of Ubisoft. And as a result, they are seen as basically the saviors of the Guillemot family's pride and joy, which is this company. The tricky thing is they signed a deal a couple of years ago agreeing to not take a larger stake in Ubisoft unless the Guillemot brothers who run Ubisoft approved of it. And as a result, Tencent is basically on the sidelines, and they're in this weird spot where they want control of Ubisoft, but the Guillemot brothers don't want to relinquish it. And so the executives over at Tencent that want to just buy out Ubisoft can't, because they signed this paperwork when Ubisoft was doing much better, saying, okay, we won't buy a bigger stake until we agree to go 50-50 or something. But now that the stock price has plummeted and they could just come in, swoop in, buy out the whole thing, they're realizing, okay, well, we need them to agree to be bought out, but they don't want to be bought out because they know that the Guillemot family would be scrubbed out of management. So it creates this really weird stalemate, which is fascinating to watch. But that's why I'm saying that I don't think that Ubisoft is under threat or risk of insolvency or bankruptcy, because if things get anywhere close to that level financially in terms of like just dire situations, they will just go to Tencent and they'll go do a 50-50 buyout. Tencent will buy out a huge chunk of the company, pay the Guillemot family to go live the rest of their lives on giant yachts, and they will take over the company and put in their own management and figure out how they want to fix the company from there. So it's not like Assassin's Creed is just gonna disappear overnight because Shadows didn't sell well. No matter what, they will continue existing. It's just a matter of how and under whose leadership, because I think everybody, both on the investment side and then also the gaming and consumer side, I think everybody kind of agrees the current leadership is just too inconsistent. Sometimes they do good and sometimes they launch NFT games. And it's like, what are we doing? But this is where I just think it's important to be precise with language, because people will throw stuff out like, oh, Ubisoft is going belly up, Ubisoft's going bankrupt or whatever. And it's just so immediately clear that they don't know what the word bankrupt means. Because it's like, they're not actually at risk of that, okay? They're at risk of corporate restructurings, of some crazy financial maneuverings, which is currently being speculated about. Basically, it looks like the Guillemot family might make a separate entity, move some of the IP into that entity, make that entity half owned by the Guillemot family trust, which is how all of the brothers own it. And then Tencent will own half of that. And that's how they'll get themselves out of that. And what they plan on doing then is something that like private equity firms do all the time, which is to basically take the debt from certain companies and move it to other companies under their leadership, and then turn that company belly up and basically dump all of the bad assets there and keep all of the good assets over in this other company. It sounds really complicated. Basically, you're just kind of playing like, you know, the shuffle cup game with the ball under the cup. You're basically just doing that with the valuable assets under one cup, and then you try to get rid of the other ones. So I think no matter what, Ubisoft will continue to exist in some way, shape, or form. Assassin's Creed, as I said, is a franchise valued at like billions of dollars, as is Rainbow Six. Those franchises are not just disappearing because, oh no, we had a bad year or 5 years. Somebody will come out and buy them or give them cash to keep going, because Rainbow prints money. Assassin's Creed makes tons of money, maybe not as much as Rainbow, but it does gangbuster numbers. People don't really realize it, but Assassin's Creed is a massive franchise, especially among the more casual crowd. And so in a way, if the title of this video is like, oh, well, of course I haven't titled it yet, but if I end up titling this, you know, is AC Shadows enough to save Ubisoft? I think the question is probably not, but I think the way they're going to be saved has been established for months or even years at this point, and it's basically going to be corporate restructurings with Daddy Tencent Warbucks coming in to just throw money at the problems, get rid of current leadership, reorganize some stuff, do some corporate finagling to get rid of debt and to get rid of other IP that have been mismanaged and underutilized. They'll probably dump like Just Dance and some of those smaller IP that make money but are not really the big name IP, and they'll just restructure and continue doing what they're doing. Don't get me wrong, it's not going to be a pretty restructuring or anything. Tencent, they are cutthroat, like business sharks. They are some of the most hardcore businessmen in the world, okay? Tencent, you don't mess with them. And when they come into your company and they say, we're going to clean this up, they mean it. They're not bringing a scalpel, they're bringing a machete. And so I would expect that there's going to be a lot of restructuring, like a lot of studios probably get closed, people get moved around, and that's just what's going to happen the second that Ubisoft opens the doors to Tencent. And it's unfortunate, a lot of people are going to lose their jobs, but I think that that's just the reality of the situation and what's going to happen. That's what happens when you have a company that's mismanaged for like a decade financially and in terms of projects and creative liberties and everything. I mean, this is just kind of what inevitably happens. With Ubisoft, it's just a little more stark and sudden because it's all probably going to happen at once, would be my guess. But Assassin's Creed, I don't think is going anywhere. As we know, there's a bunch of other projects currently in the works. This reporting from Tom Henderson from May of last year was talking about AC Red, which of course now we know is Shadows. This was a report saying that we were going to get gameplay at Ubisoft Forward in June, which we ended up seeing, of course. And now we have the game. But he also outlined some other stuff, such as the next mainline entry, Assassin's Creed Hexe, is currently scheduled to release in 2026. Other projects include Obsidian, which is the Black Flag remake, probably coming out later this year as well, which would be crazy. Nebula, which is a game with settings based in India, the Aztec Empire, and the Mediterranean. It's going to be multi-continent, a massive game, tons of different areas. I have no idea what that's going to be like, but that's apparently coming. Raid, which is a free-to-play 4-player co-op that's PvE. This is something that is jiving with like Ubisoft's broader strategy, which is to bring back some of the multiplayer modes that were more common with like the AC3 Black Flag era. People forget nowadays, but AC for a long time, especially back in like the golden age, had multiplayer games and like systems built into their games. People forget about it. They just remember like Black Flag. A lot of people forget that Black Flag had a massive multiplayer mode. Echoes, another multiplayer title, and another AC remake, which are all scheduled, this is probably for the first game, which are all scheduled to be released by the end of the decade. And there's probably more than that. There's the rumored AC Invictus, which is another multiplayer game that's being rumored and speculated about. So they have a lot of pots on the stove. AC Jade is not mentioned here. That's another like mobile game thing that's being developed with Tencent. That's the China Assassin's Creed game that they did playtests of last year. So they have a lot of pots on the stove. AC is not just gonna disappear overnight. It's just not. And anybody telling you that just probably doesn't have any idea what they're talking about. But I don't think that Ubisoft is going to just magically be okay now, and we're not going to see the stock like shoot up to $50 a share again. I just don't think we're going to see that. I think we're going to probably have a like investor report in a handful of months that tells us roughly how Shadows did, and it'll probably be pretty good. And then probably later this year, we get the Black Flag remake, and that does pretty good as well, or even great. But I think all of the stuff going on behind the scenes with Tencent will still happen no matter what. I think it's been written in the stars for months or even years at this point, and there's not much anybody can do to change that, unfortunately. To be clear, I'm not happy about this. I'm not thrilled that all of these companies are kind of getting hodgepodged together and merging together, but I'm also going to tell you what I think and what I think the reality is of the situation. And that is that I think that years of mismanagement from Ubisoft higher ups doesn't just magically get fixed with one success, even if this game is that success. I think fundamentally stuff has to change. And I think it's just a matter of time before they do. That being said, are you playing AC Shadows right now? Or are you jumping into the game? If so, let me know what you think of it. Let me know also if you want me to do like a big critique of the game. My base review was already over an hour long if you've not seen it. So I shared most of my thoughts very verbosely in that video. But if you guys want me to do a big breakdown, kind of like I did with AC Valhalla in that big 3-hour video, let me know. I basically have all the notes and everything already. I had to try very hard to get my review down to an hour. So if you want to hear all of those thoughts, let me know and I'll just sit down and film it because it's basically all done. I just would have to film it and edit it. So let me know if you'd be interested in that. Or if you're like, hell no, please talk about something else. I totally get it. That's going to do it for me. Make sure to let me know what you think about all of this in the comment section below. I will be looking out for your thoughts. And of course, like the video if you want more business-like breakdowns of the industry, because there's a lot of crazy stuff happening right now. And there, perhaps more importantly, are a lot of people talking about this stuff that have no idea what they're talking about, which is fine. I don't know most things, okay? I'm not brilliant or particularly smart. I just know a lot about a few very specific issues and topics, and this happens to be one of them. And it drives me crazy when people who clearly don't know what they're talking about start rambling about, yeah, well, this company's basically going insolvent and it's basically going to be bankrupt. It's like, no. No, like bankruptcy is something you talk about with like Embracer when they spend a ton of money they don't have and they get promised a $2 billion investment from Saudi Arabia and then they don't get it. And so they start like freaking out, panicking, selling everything. That is a different situation. With Ubisoft, you just have a company that like has too many employees and has some games that have been underperforming recently, but their books are relatively solid and they're not too like on the mend. They can deal with it pretty quickly, and they have a very, very rich uncle that's willing to bail them out of all of their problems. So it's just a different situation. But anyway, let me know your thoughts. I'm bad at outros. As you can tell, this video is going on too long. I'm sorry. Much love. I'll see you in the next one. Hugs and kisses. Bye.